views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to BronxTalk. If you look at the many issues that need to be addressed directly right now, right up there near the top is the notion of jobs and rebuilding. And a lot of the times in the Bronx over the many years where we've been rebuilding, because this is not the first time we've had to rebound from some sort of devastation, the problem is they build and it's not the Bronx people who get the jobs to do the building. And one of the agendas that we're going to need to do right now as we rebuild the economy in the Bronx and, of course, throughout the city and beyond is to make sure that Bronx people get those jobs. And so this evening, we're going to take two different looks and two different people who are on there in this concept of making sure Bronx people get jobs. So to get us started, let me say good evening to David Meade from Building Skills New York. Nice to have you with us, David.
Thanks, Gary.
And also from the Thinkubator. And if you don't know what the Thinkubator is or what a Thinkubator is, you're going to find out. And that would be from founder and CEO, Dr. Edward Summers. Dr. Summers, nice to have you with us.
It's great to be here again, Gary. Good to be here with David.
Yep, and I think we're all on the same page here. And I mean, I'm the talk show guy, but I certainly believe that we've got to get Bronx people this work. So, Mr. Meade, let's talk a little bit about the Building Skills New York. Let's set the definitions so people know who you are and what you do, and then we'll break it down and really try and find opportunities.
Sounds great. And, thanks again, Gary, for having me on. I really appreciate it. And it's great to get connected with Eddie, and I'm excited to be working with him as we move forward. But yeah, so Building Skills, we continue to expand our mission, our footprint. We are a nonprofit organization. Our mission is specifically help underemployed individuals find construction jobs all over the city. And Gary, since I've last been here, believe it or not, it's almost been a couple of years, we've significantly expanded the group. So we're on over 80 construction sites. We work with 100 different contractors, plumbers, electricians, masons, et cetera. And we're on pace to do about 400 construction placements this year, which is a big increase over last year. And all things considered with the pandemic, I think that's a pretty big deal. About 30% of the candidates we're working with are Bronx residents too. And we're working on 20 active sites here in the Bronx. So working a lot with the Bronx partners. And our model really works in a few different ways. The first is we rely heavily on our community partners. So great Bronx groups like the Bronx Works and East Side Settlement House and the HOPE program, who send us.
I'm sure is in there.
Wedco, absolutely. Yeah. They send us really great pre-vetted individuals who've had maybe a little bit of construction experience, but are really looking to get their foot into the door in the industry. And, as this has been a challenging year for all of us, we've had to transition our typical screenings, which we would do in person, to virtual. So we do them every Monday, Thursday morning. They're at 6:30, so it's construction hours. We expect folks to be there right at 6:30. It's like one of the first tests for folks.
Talk to me, if you would, Mr. Meade, about the process. So you said you're in construction sites. Now, you're not the developer running the construction. How do you get the development companies, the realtors, and all those people to say, oh, we'll hire Building Skills New York's people? That's a very important thing, because a lot of groups are saying we're training people, but got to get them jobs, man.
Yeah. I think we've been very fortunate. I've been with Building Skills about 3.5 years. We were created by the real estate and construction industry, so we have that kind of built-in network right away. So the individuals that are building at the sites, the general contractors, the subcontractors, that's our network. And our mission is to connect individuals to jobs, but it's also really to make sure we're finding the right fit for the employer network. I mentioned 100 or so contractors we work with. If we're not finding the right fit for them, then it's still going to be more of a challenge for them to call back to us. So we really go through a pretty in-depth process. Like I mentioned, the 6:30 in the morning starts for virtual recruitment right now. When we place individuals too, we're very in the weeds. We help map, get to the individual, the site, the foreman they're going to be meeting with, really kind of walk them through what a first successful day looks like. Yep.
One of the things I want to do is talk about training, but I want to bring Dr. Summers in here. So from a philosophical point of view, first of all, let's just talk about the Thinkubator and how it came about. And then I really want to, fill in the missing piece of the agenda that drives what Mr. Meade's work is. So why don't we start with the Thinkubator?
Sure. Thank you, Gary. So the Thinkubator is a new organization, new nonprofit in the Bronx, but it has its early beginnings with the Bronx Private Industry Council, which was a collective of businesses, the Bronx Borough President, and nonprofit Here to Here that focused on bringing together and coalescing the Bronx business industry with educators, nonprofit, and government to focus on youth talent development in the Bronx. And I served as the inaugural executive director of the Bronx Private Industry Council, and we placed over 2 summers, over 800 young people in internship experiences in every industry in the Bronx, from construction to housing to community-based organizations to the Bronx Zoo. So that organization started out as a task force in 2018, hired me in 2019, and then in 2020, given COVID and its impact, we made the determination that the Bronx private industry, as we first conceived it, was not going to be able to be sustainable. So we decided that instead of staying with the Bronx Private Industry Council, we formed the Thinkubator, which is really flipping the model of the Bronx Private Industry Council from being a business-driven organization to a youth-driven organization. And so
and let me just interject, and that's because your assessment of the business community is that they weren't going to be able to produce the jobs, and the agenda is the agenda. That's what we're going to do wherever we get it, right? Do I understand that?
Absolutely. And part of the problem is because of the impact of COVID, businesses in the Bronx, as we did an assessment of the coalition that we formed, we had 37 businesses in the beginning of COVID who were really committed to youth talent development. They all were at a point where they didn't know. They were laying off employees. They lost a tremendous amount of revenues. And so they didn't know if they can continue to maintain an external organization and support it. And so we said, why don't we flip the agenda and make it youth-driven with the Thinkubator, where funders such as foundations and government will be more likely to fund an organization that's focused on youth, that's driven by the youth, versus it being driven by businesses. Typically, with coalitions and associations, the businesses typically have to fund the operations of it in order to get foundations to fund it. So we flipped the model here with the Thinkubator.
One of the things that's very interesting is that Mr. Meade talked about using various Bronx organizations, development organizations and all that. You folks have done very well with DreamYard. And it's a different sort of organization, but it is exactly what you're talking about, because it's run by young people, and they want to do all that kind of personal development for people who otherwise don't get it, right? Or am I following it?
You're following it absolutely correct, Gary. And DreamYard is one of our founding partners for the Thinkubator. The name Thinkubator came from a program that the Bronx PIC piloted last summer called the Thinkubator Solves Now. And the Bronx PIC Thinkubator was this design thinking student consultancy, which is one of many of our programs that we have at the Thinkubator now, where young people worked with clients. So clients were businesses or nonprofit sector or government, where they had a challenge, and the young people used a design thinking methodology to solve that problem. So we've done 6 clients, we worked with 6 clients so far where we've helped them solve major problems that they were faced with. But that program stemmed from our work with DreamYard and Here to Here. And that
give me one sample about the kind of problem they may have dealt with. And then the next thing I want to talk with both of you about, and we're going to start with you, Dr. Summers, and then to Mr. Meade, is about who are the people that we're working with. I want to describe who they are so that they can identify themselves in this dialogue. So the first part is give me a sample, and then we're going to go to that.
Sure. So I'll give you a sample of our work with Spring Bank last summer in 2019. We worked with Spring Bank to think about how you unbank how you bank the unbanked. We have a huge population in the Bronx who don't bank with formal institutions, tend to go to cashiers, pawn shops. And so students started to work with Spring Bank to think about how to tackle this problem. So the students came up with several solutions. One which Spring Bank really, really liked was designing a game that was a financial literacy app where young people and others who are not banked could go on a game, earn credits throughout it, but then understand about financial literacy. And at the end of the product, it was you would bank with an institution, whether Spring Bank or another bank.
Tremendous work. Now, I want to know the people you work with and then the people that Mr. Meade works with. Here's my sense, is that in some ways, from what we traditionally know about schools used to provide a lot of this, but because of a variety of reasons, and that's for another show, the schools don't do that. And I talk to after school people and all those other people, and they say we're filling in that enrichment. Who are the people, I hate to use a marketing term, but who are the people who are targeted to be part of the Thinkubator? And then I know Mr. Meade has a lot to say about that for what he does. So we'll start with you, Dr. Summers, and then we'll go to Mr. Meade.
Sure. Right now, our focus is on youth from ages 14 to 24, typically connected to an institution. However, we have done a lot of thinking, and there's a huge gap for disconnected youth as well. So we're just new. We just started out a month ago.
I see. All right.
But we will work with that population as well. Right now, we're connected to schools, but we are thinking about how we serve other populations as well.
And I think the definition of how and why you got founded coming out of COVID is part of that, because things are changing, and a so-called needy population may have a different dynamic right about now.
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Meade, where are you at? And let's talk about the people that you serve with Building Skills New York, because it is a specific population and one that I think has the need for the employment, and number two, hopefully can get those jobs.
Yeah, and I think it is. It's an underemployed population we work with. Our age range is 18 and up. As I mentioned before, we work with a whole host of community partners, about 80 or so community partners around the city. So it's a lot of graduates out of, like I mentioned, Bronx Works earlier, their Stronger Fathers program. They send a lot of people coming through that program to us. So it's a large population around the city. And I think, Gary, picking up on one thing you had mentioned too, and it's very important to building skills since I've last been on the show, is that connection also to training. And I do think the individuals that we're helping find work and, find reemployment, we're making sure it's retention. There's real substance behind the numbers. I mean, just don't say we do 400 a year. We're making sure that people are really learning something at the job, and they're able to find that next opportunity. But
I got to just jump in on that number, because what happens with numbers, I mean, I'm a consumer as well. When they see it on TV, 400. But I want you to think of the individual 400 families that have somebody who may not have had employment before. So, 400 is not 10,000. And I guess 10,000 would be like amazing. But think of the impact of 400 Bronx families with somebody employed gainfully on a really good project. I'm sorry, I just had to interrupt with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
It doesn't fly by.
It's so important, especially right now with what we've been going through this year. I think, the idea that construction was shut down like everything else. It was part of the phase one reopening. Did open back up in May, but, just to be honest, sites fell behind 2 or 3 months. So if anything, it's part of the reason I'm excited to be on today is we have so much opportunity again. We've got a lot of jobs that we're looking to fill. So we're trying to make as many connections as possible. We're looking for good entry-level qualified talent, looking to get the word out on that. And I was just going to mention real quickly about the training piece, because I do think it's important, and it's something, we can explore a little bit more. But one thing that we're really, really focused on is how we really support some of the vocational programs that go on around the city. I've got lots and lots of examples of really good young adults that are coming out of vocational programs that get connected to us. Our employers, our contractors are really interested in having conversations with those young adults. We actually placed a young man last week. I had a really good interview with him, and he graduated from Bronx Design and Construction Academy, just graduated. He's real interested intellectually, got some training there. So we connected him to one of our general labor contractors so he can get used to what it's like being on a construction site. Our plan is,
Before you go to the plan, that young man you were talking about, Give me his profile. Did he graduate high school? Did he graduate college? Is he in between? I want to define who that person is, because nobody should be getting lost anymore. We're done with that.
Yep.
No more getting lost. There's places for you, whoever it is, to get work. Let's identify who that person is, so we can say this person was that, and now he or she, of course, is this. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great way to focus it. So with him specifically, he graduated from high school, came in, did one of our 6:30 in the morning interviews with us. We did connect him to a contractor, and he's getting good. He's been there all week, getting good on-site construction experience, New York City construction site experience, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on. What he's interested in pursuing as he builds his career is he wants to become, a master electrician eventually. So there's two things we're focusing on with this young man, and we're doing this to a lot of the individuals that come through our program. One is, let's see, how he does on the construction site, gets used to what construction's like. After that, let's find him work with an electrical contractor. In addition, we've started working with some community colleges. So we're working with Bronx Community College, LaGuardia Community College, providing deeper dive skills training. So not only do we want to eventually get him some really good on-the-job training with an electrical contractor, we want to tie that to some, weeknight or weekend construction skills training that he can do while he's working.
Boy, do I love this. And I want to say something. You're talking about a young man, but I know there's young women in the Bronx who can do this stuff and have interest in it. And let's go. I'm going to really do something that's going to make Dr. Summers fall off his chair. Now, we both are aware that the city of New York, in all its wisdom, was because David mentioned the Academy of Design and Construction. They were either thinking of or already eliminated the plumbing program. I mean, are we out of our minds in this day and age when people need jobs and we're building buildings? I mean, put two together. So just your thought about the importance of vocational programs and, getting kids to get these jobs. These are good jobs and these are good kids. These are my Bronx kids,
Yeah, and I think it's a big issue that has been raised this summer about the city eliminating vocational programs all throughout New York. These are good paying, well-paying jobs, career-paying jobs that you can make a really good wage and raise a family on, whether it's an electrician, whether it's a plumber. These skills are skills that are still needed to make our economy function, right?
Make our economy function, make Gary's kitchen function. I got a little plumbing thing that my wife and I are sitting here going, I guess we'll can. And let me just add one more thing. We did buy a dishwasher. This is a true story. And so, getting it installed by the place we bought it from was going to be very expensive. We called we put it like on a neighborhood Facebook page, and somebody said, "Oh, I got a guy," and he was a Bronx guy, and he was completely great. We loved having him in our home, and he knew his stuff. It took him a little while because he wasn't part of the company that provided the unit. I mean, I don't know what to say. Are we stupid? No, it's so easy.
This is a critical part of our economy that we're just missing the loop on here. When we were the Bronx Pick, we worked with an organization called Stacks and Jewels that was based out of Boston that's now in New York because of our assistance. And they teach young people and partner with high schools on teaching young people building automation systems. And really, these are some really good jobs, well-paying jobs, particularly given where our economy is going, given how buildings are built these days. Automation skills are really critically important. So I think vocational programs are still really valid and really important, and they really do put people on a pathway to being able to sustain their families. So we're missing a mark when we take away programs like this. And the thing that I like about the Thinkubator is that we don't work with just one sector. People always ask me, are you only working with the knowledge economy? No, we work with all sectors, right? All sectors are going to provide young people with jobs that pay a meaningful wage that will help them sustain themselves. We teach young people how to think critically, how to communicate, how to project manage, and then we get specialized when the young people go through our third and fourth years of our program. But we are really open to working with all sectors because we do believe that you needed a very diversified economy. You can't just have one sort of economy. We've seen that during COVID, particularly as the Bronx was labeled as a central borough when people still had to make sure that the city was able to run. And so they had to still work during COVID. They couldn't just stay home and operate their respective jobs from home, but they actually had to go to make sure that the city lights was on and other trains were running and such. And so these vocational jobs are really, really critically important. And we have a huge group of people who are retiring, who are just done. And at that age where they're done, they're ready to retire, they're ready for this next part of their life.
So your point is that there are jobs. There are opportunities. I'm going to say something that's out of both of your realms for me, because I'm still thinking about that administrative decision out there in City Hall that said maybe we ought to cut back on these programs. I know where it comes from. Where it comes from is the emphasis on grades and testing and all those kinds of things, which may measure valuable skills, but it doesn't get everybody involved and it doesn't take everything into account. And there could be lives and jobs and education outside of those kinds of things. But because the schools are so pressured on those things, we've lost our sensibility for, things that both of you really are talking about. And just to be real, if I took auto mechanics when I was in high school at Dewitt Clinton High School, I'd have saved myself a hell of a lot of money. Although maybe I'm giving it to some Bronx young people who are doing the job. Anyway, David Meade, let's talk specifically about training in terms of how you go from, okay, we've taken him or her in, and now we want to get them trained, and there are licensing. I mean, and this is oppressive to some people, say, hey, I can do all this stuff, but I ain't got the credentials. So talk to me about the credentials you need and how you make it.
And I think the point that Eddie just made, which was really important, is there is, particularly in the sector of construction, I know manufacturing as well in New York City, there is an aging population. So there is just such a need for this. I want to back that up again. I also, as a quick note, there's a real gap in middle skills that we find. So, you're coming out of vocation programs or different, training skill sets. We find
what do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
So for construction, like somebody that can walk onto a site, that can bend conduit, that can terminate low voltage, that can frame something out, that can measure appropriately. We're finding there's just a real lack of that. And I think that'd be a whole other show why that is the case. There's a lack of training resource around that. But I think that's incredibly important. But yeah, I mean, to your question, Gary, we want to focus on folks coming out with the appropriate credentials, with deep dive skills training, so they can, most appropriately match the jobs that we're sourcing for. I think another key thing here is safety training. Construction is challenging. It's hard work. It's very, very important that folks are aware of the environment that they're in. I applaud the city. They recently extended a site safety training program, which is super important. Individuals have to have 40 hours of safety training before they can walk onto a site. And I think that's fantastic. That's the first thing we focus on with our candidates, the most important thing. COVID is, it's a concern. It's an issue.
Safety and construction sites, you got to do that. I have to tell you, I've seen some construction sites and I said, you guys are not doing the right thing. I can see it right away.
We had a young man who, give you another example. He came a Bronx resident. He was working, he got furloughed when the pandemic hit, was working a construction job. He was connected to, I keep mentioning BronxWorks, one of our favorite partners. They referred him over to us. We were able to get him a job over in Hunts Point. He's been working there for a couple of months, doing a great job. But his thing, they're starting to create positions like this on construction sites. There's always safety managers and fire safety, fire watch, different things. He's actually a COVID safety manager. So he's checking in, making sure temperatures are taken when folks come on site, that there's appropriate social distancing. There's extra hand washing stations. So those have actually become some of the roles on construction sites, which makes total sense right now.
And Dr. Summers, let's start to wrap this up. Let's talk a little bit about, really what's the message and who is the message to? Because you deal with young people, but you also deal with organizations, and then of course you want to deal with people who are going to employ them or give them a work. So give me the message and what all of each of those groups ought to be thinkubatoring about.
That's right. I love that, Gary. It's great. But before I do that, real quick, David, we work with Andromeda Community Initiative, which is a great partner of ours. And I'm happy, this is Gary, ringing bells to Gary's ears, is that I would love to connect with you afterwards, because we have a great partnership with Andromeda. And then we've worked with a number of other construction companies that are based in the Bronx to help them fill their talent needs. So we'd love to connect with you on that. And
what you just said underscores another of the important ingredients of this, and that is we have so many resources. I can't tell you how many people I see 2 or 3 groups doing kind of the same agenda. If we have our little teams here, guess what? Hey, guess what, David? I got something going. Eddie, I'm looking for students or whatever. Go ahead, Eddie. I interrupted you, which I
love it, Gary. I always love when you interrupt. I love this show, obviously. I think for us at the Thinkubator, I love what our tagline is. We bring power to Bronx youth voices, and we do that through internships, student consultancy, placements at jobs, and connecting to educational partners. And for us, the message here is that we have such great talent here in the borough. We just need to give them the exposure and experiences that they need to be successful. And we have it right here. And so I always bet on the Bronx, and I always bet on the ingenuity of the people here in the Bronx. We just need to be heard. We need to be listened to and exposed to the opportunities to really thrive and shine.
And really, the clock is ticking because it has to be done now. And certainly if you're talking to me and to all of the people who watch BronxNet, we get it in the Bronx. And I talk to people all the time, and they all say the same thing about who we are and what we're about. And right now is the time, because there's an opening out there. There's room for new economies. There's room for new people. There's room for development that doesn't gentrify, but helps. I just feel like this is a really interesting time to do that. It's not easy, but we got to do that. And so then maybe we'll let David Meade of Building Skills New York, before you just give us the contact info, what's the future of this? Do you see this expanding? Do you see yourself looking at new things, or are you just going to keep mining this because this is where it's at?
I definitely think we're going to expand. We're going to continue doing more numbers, continue to work on more construction sites. I really think the sky is the limit. Like I said, we're busier now than we've ever been. I think folks are trying to catch up in construction, and a lot of our work is
jobs, man. They need jobs. So if they work for a company, now they're saying I got to work for myself because the company's not happening, and I got skills.
Yeah. And we have a lot of opportunity, and I know you'll put the contact information up, but we're doing every Monday, Thursday morning, active virtual recruitments. We encourage anybody who's interested in construction to give us a call and register, and we'll get you set up. We'll get an interview going, and we'll make a connection. We have a big network in the Bronx of employers that are looking for talented construction individuals.
Do you and people would go downtown? Are there Bronx locations, or
it's virtual, so we're doing them over Zoom. Yeah. But it's working out. I mean, there's other challenges there, but we really have kind of refined that. We're able to do interviews in real time, and like our usual model, if we find somebody who's got a fit, who's got some skills, especially right now, we're going to get them out the door that day or the next day and get them connected to a job.
Are there certain types of projects that are happening now in terms of a trend of a type of project? I mean, I'm aware of various projects. I'm hoping you're going to tell me it's in affordable housing, real affordable housing, but that's just me.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of the affordable housing is, a lot of leaders in affordable housing have originally, created our organization. That's a big part of our pipeline. But other stuff too, we've got some, there's some market rate housing that we're working on, and there's some NYCHA related work that we're doing as well. So a lot of work specifically in the Bronx.
And I think one of the things that Eddie said, he even mentioned the MTA. I mean, you want to, whether it be on a technical side or, jobs. I almost said jobs man, but I want to make sure it's jobs women too, because we all need work. Anyway, Eddie Summers from the Thinkubator. We'll make sure to have all the contact up there. I know people are going to want to get to you. We always appreciate your input. We appreciate your energy for our young people. And thank you for joining us. David Meade from Building Skills New York, thank you so much. We're going to keep going. And maybe we did make a little marriage here today on our Zoom box. So anyway, also, I do want to welcome our new producer. Stephen Powell is a new producer on the program. This is his first program, and we appreciate him being with us. Next week, we've got a couple of options. I don't want to say what it is, but we'll be back with more Bronx talk on BronxNet next week. Have a good night.